Hello, hello. Welcome back to Let's Talk Ray Bradbury, the show here on Let's Talk Entertainment, where going back to 2018, I've been attempting to read and review each of the roughly 600 short stories written by the late, great Ray Bradbury in his long career. Today we are up to story number 256, which is also the 17th of 22 short stories in his 2009 collection, We'll Always Have Paris. Today's story is called The Reincarnate. Alright then, so the way that these reviews work is I do a brief synopsis of what happens in the story, and then I just try to wrap it up with a very brief analysis of what happens, what it all means, is it a good story worth your time to read, what I took away from it, is this the type of story that is worthy of the Bradbury name. Alright then, so this is a very good story. A man dies and he begins to decay in his coffin, but he also has a sense of awareness, and after several months, he pushes up through the ground and begins to walk by night. Immediately after leaving the graveyard, he meets another man like him, and this man is restless, and he's not at all happy being dead. He believes that he has become a minority among the living, and therefore he's trying to raise an army of the dead just like him to take on the living. He asks that our protagonist join him, but our protagonist has something else to do. He begins to wander by night, and soon he finds the window of his former lover, Kim. He taps on the window, and eventually she sort of sees him and hears him, and she's able to make contact with him. And it's unclear how physically present he is or not, but there seems to be some sort of a gap between the living and the dead. But finally, he makes contact with Kim, his lover. He wants to spend time with her, even if it's just a few minutes every night, and she's sort of reluctant to do this, but she does go out with him, and they go to an ice cream bar, and they sit down and they have ice cream, but he finds out that he can't eat, he can't smell, he can't taste, and in fact somebody else seems to notice his smell, but apparently they can see him. They go out into the night, and Kim basically reveals that, she's not comforted by his presence. She needs to move on, and she doesn't need him to be there physically because, in fact, she is carrying his baby, and therefore she feels that he's always with her. So she sort of has a collapse, but the story moves on, and he begins wandering back towards the graveyard. Along the way, he encounters the man who was trying to raise an army, but he's sort of sad because he's standing there and there's nobody there. Nobody's gathered. They've all found other things to do. They all have moved on, unlike him, who is unable to move on. Our main character, our main protagonist, often described as a walker. Interestingly enough, he wanders back to his casket. He lays down. He sort of feels waves of light and sensation pass over him, and before he knows it, he is reincarnated as his baby, and he doesn't remember his past life except for he does remember the name Kim. That is the only knowledge that he has, Kim. So this is an achingly beautiful ghost story / zombie story. I'm wondering, did Ray Bradbury like The Walking Dead? This collection came out in 2009, so The Walking Dead comic series was in fact in publication at the time. But it's unclear when this story was actually written. It was first published here, but there's not a lot of information about when these stories came into being, but I would like to think that Ray Bradbury was in fact a fan of the Walking Dead comics. I think that would be cool as hell. The story is a bit vague. We're not entirely clear whether these are ghosts or zombies. At some points it seems like people can physically see them. At other points they might even smell them. There's all this talk about being pushing up out of the grave, and you think people would notice that sort of thing. So I think it's left deliberately vague, but I think it's also centers on this idea that most people don't want to see the dead. Therefore, even if they are physically there, people are not, their mind's not allowing them to sort of experience horror. Instead, they just have a strong sense of indifference. So that's what I think is what's going on. I think it's in a vague netherworld region between life and death, between the physical and the dead and the spiritual. What's really interesting about this story, what's most interesting perhaps, is that it's told from the second person point of view. This is really neat. We don't get the name of the character, but it does put the reader in the shoes of the dead protagonist, who thinks that death is bad, but I have things to do. I want to keep on living. When in fact, by insisting on staying in the world. He's sort of preventing this reincarnation in the sort of the soul of his baby, but also he is prolonging the grief experienced by his lover, Kim. I think it's a great little story that ponders what it means to be dead, or what it means to be among the dead, what it means to be a living person who can't let go of their dead, or who has successfully let go of their dead, but the dead won't let go of them, sort of the way that feels. Ultimately, I think the story is about death being a relief, death not being something to be scared of, death being another stage of existence, perhaps, and holding on too hard causes pain for the living as well as the dead. So I guess the idea here is to move on with good memories instead of festering in your crypt. All right then, that was the Reincarnate. Next time we'll be looking at a story called Remembrance, Ohio, which is story number 257 in our long journey here towards reading all of the stories of Ray Bradbury. That'll be the 18th of 22 short stories in We'll Always Have Paris. So we are quickly approaching the end of this phase of Let's Talk Ray Bradbury. Thank you for joining me. I hope that you enjoyed the story, because it is worth your time to read if you do. And I will see you again in a few short days. See you later.